Abdulla Abunayyan, welcome to Unscripted. Any surprising feedback that you got that you didn't expect?
Oh, yes. I remember in consulting, we used to focus on work-life balance, but I don't think that this is a good terminology, work-life balance. Work and life come hand in hand. Enjoy everything you go through.
You didn't?
I would focus on kindness, humbleness, respect. It's really astonishing how people can underestimate the value of a soul.
I always say that the best thing about consulting are the people that you work with. You're always working with the best, pushing each other to learn more, do more, be more, and go even further. Which is why I'm very excited to be able to go through these conversations with some of our alumni who've gone on to even greater success beyond their consulting career, and learn from them about the high points, the low points, the achievements, the wins, and the lessons that we can all take and apply in our future journeys. Abdulla Abunayyan, Chief Business Development Officer at Abunayyan Holding. Welcome to Unscripted.
Hi, welcome, thank you.
I'm looking forward to our conversation today because obviously you were with us at some point and that's why you're in Unscripted, but you are unique in profile in terms of the other guests we've had on this podcast in that you actually work for the Abunayyan Holding, which is your family's business.
Correct.
And so I'm looking forward to delving into this. But before we get into the dynamics of what it means to be in a family business, I'd love to know, when you were finishing your university and thinking where to start your career, there seems to not have been any pressure on you to actually join the family business, even though it was quite well established at the time since your grandfather started it. Was that on purpose? Was that your choice? How did that flexibility come about?
Well, there is an unwritten rule in our family business, which is basically you need to build up a few experiences before joining the family business. 3 years at minimum. Then you can join the family business. And also back then, we as third generation, we weren't really involved in the business. So whenever we wanted to get involved, the family would say, focus on your education, focus on your present time, let this later on will come. So don't stress yourself on these things. So we went along. Then I decided to join consultancy.
And why did you choose consulting?
That's a good question. I had few options, but I chose consulting because I had an idea to do my MBA 2-3 years down the road. So I chose consulting. Also, the diversification of everyday work and consulting is actually intriguing. It's very interesting. So I chose to do that.
And you said the plan was consulting to get you to an MBA, but you didn't actually end up doing
No,
an MBA. Why?
no. Well, I think I did my MBA in those 3 years in consulting through on-the-job training. The long nights with our colleagues, working very hard for our clients in multiple sectors, multiple topics. I felt that an MBA would be good, but it would be a rubber stamp in a way that I got my MBA. But deep inside, I know that I got it from my experience.
You learned it on
with
the
you.
job.
I learned it on the job.
Okay. And the family business is in water and energy related services. Was that something that you worked on during your consulting career?
Yes. So back then, when I joined Booz, there was a practice called Energy, Chemicals and Utilities, EC&U. And I chose, or I preferred to join that practice because of the family business. So later on, even if I don't join the family business until 10, 15 years later, at least I build up few experiences and knowledge around that sector which we operate in.
Okay. So you stayed 3 or 4 years?
Almost, I think between 3 and 4, I cannot
almost,
remember.
Almost 4 years
That was 13
with
years.
us. Yes.
Yes.
And so then you left consulting and you went into the family business.
Correct.
What skills or things that you learned during your consulting time did you still find useful, or maybe even till today?
Discipline.
Discipline.
Yes, in my consulting days, you can make mistakes. Everyone, we are human beings, but you have to own the file you're working on. You have to complete the task as much as you can, however you do it, with the support of people as well if needed. So it's the discipline, the ownership that really stayed with me until today, from that 3 to 4 years in consulting. Until today, I believe that's the most important thing I got from.
So I've heard stories about people leaving consulting, going into non-consulting businesses, and after a couple of weeks being taken aside and saying, people telling them, you're too intense, chill, you're not in consulting anymore. Did you have any kind of reaction like that in terms of your work ethic and how much work you put into, how much effort you put into your job versus those around you, or is it already a very hard working environment?
To be honest with you, it is a hard working environment, but maybe because it's a family business and I am a family member, it intensifies that kind of hard working environment in me. It wasn't different. It was as demanding as consulting, if not more, because of the psychological part of things that maybe you wouldn't see in businesses outside of the family. So I think that's about it. Yeah.
Hey, let's dig into that a little bit, because first, before we talk about it, before talking about what it's like to be in the family business, that wasn't the plan, but you ended up going into the family business after consulting. How did that come about? You mentioned to me.
Yeah.
And maybe you'd think it's unplanned, but I'm thinking maybe it was a planned meeting.
Maybe.
So tell me about
So
that.
one day we were in a hotel in the kingdom, and you work until you can't anymore. So
It's much better now.
yeah, well, yeah, I believe so. So I saw the chairman of the of Abunayyan in the lobby. So we started chit-chatting and talking and so on. And
So he would have been your uncle?
my uncle. Then we kept in touch. And a few years later, he asked to see me in his office for a role in a company within the holding, so an SBU, a strategic business unit. And with no hesitation, I said, okay.
So why with no hesitation?
I feel that it's a duty call. And yes, you can say no, but my personality would not, or my consciousness would not allow me to say no. Plus, I was enthusiastic about it. I wanted it. Yeah, and when it was brought up to me, it wasn't like something that I would think about twice. Why not?
I'm guessing it must have been already in the back of your mind for you to have chosen to be also in consulting within the energy practice, presumably, because you were sort of maybe hedging your bets or preparing yourself, leaving your options open?
But not as soon as 3-4 years down the road.
Okay. You were
Maybe
thinking
10, 15.
Okay.
A different, role, not an employee, probably a committee member, a board member. So, but it happened.
And your father had his own business, right?
My father, yes. My father is the eldest among my uncles. And he had his own business, which is basically a factory and a showroom of kitchens, German kitchens. Back then, it was scarce, to say the least, about kitchen business in Saudi Arabia, and the wood and so on. But
he wasn't pulling you in his direction?
I was too young. I was still in school. He closed it when I was in high school.
Okay, and he left it open in terms. And there was no, from the way you describe it, there was no pressure as we were being brought up that you have to join the family business. But was there an expectation? Did all your siblings, for example, join the family business?
Not all.
Okay. So some went on.
Some did and went on a different role outside of the business.
Okay.
One would join very soon. No pressure, but it was instilled in me somehow that I wanted to really support the family. By the way, we are, I think, third generation is more than 60, 70 people. Only about two or three are in the family business.
Ah, okay.
So I felt that I need to be there.
That's something that you want.
I want it, yes.
Are you going to leave the same flexibility for your kids as they're still very young, but when they grow up, are you going to leave the same flexibility, or are you going to instill in them a desire to join the family business?
Well, I think it's too early and premature, but I would love to see them in the family business, but I would never say no if they choose anything else.
So from the outside in, people think, okay, it's the Abunayyan Holding company, so your name is on the door, it's on the building, it's your uncle was the chairman when you joined,
And still is.
and still is the chairman. So it must be super easy. Everyone just says yes to you. You get promoted super quickly. You get all the easy jobs, and it's like somehow I'm sure it's not like that. Tell me, what's the reality of being in your family's business versus being somewhere else as an employee?
People might say this about family businesses, but at the end, yes, I am a family member, but my relationship to that business is an employment relationship. I'm not a shareholder. I am an employee of the company, and I do my best to serve that company. The only difference that people don't see from the outside between a family member in the business, not all family members, but some, and I believe I'm one of these people, those people, I see this as a one-way ticket. There is no going back. I will always be there. I will do my best to help the family business. Other employees who are doing great and so on in family businesses do have the luxury of retiring, not only exiting, retiring, do have the luxury of joining a new, different job. But family members who have these or this mentality will always stick to the business. So I will always be there unless I get fired.
Does that happen?
That does. In family businesses?
Yes.
Yeah, why not?
Has
You
it
get warnings and no, in our business, no.
Okay.
But you, as I told you, maybe this is a bit aggressive, but it can happen. I've seen it in other family businesses.
Okay. It's interesting you use the word luxury. You said the luxury of retiring or changing jobs. For you, you see it as a lifetime duty that you have to make this work because this is your family's legacy.
Listen, there are family members who joined and left and joined a different job.
So what makes you different?
The same reason I said, or I told you that it's a one-way ticket, the mentality.
Where do you think that comes from?
What I learned from family members, some of the family members who really worked hard, spent more than half of their life serving the family business. So if they did that, why, who should continue doing this if it's not us? So maybe, by the way, there is no wrong or right, but that's me.
Do you recall at what point as you were growing up you made this decision? That this is where I'm going to be? Like, not the 3 years or the 10 years, but that in your mind where I'm going to be eventually is in the family business?
No, never.
It was never a conscious decision?
No, I knew that I will always be there for the family business. But a full-time employee for almost 13 years now in the family business, I never saw it coming.
If that conversation with your uncle had not happened in the lobby or he hadn't called you in and told you, would you be there now?
That's a good question. I think I would. There is
something that has been instilled in you. As you
yeah,
said.
I think I would, but I don't know if it would be a full-time employment, full-time job, or committees and board level.
Okay. So you mentioned board level. You've gone through the group, doing different jobs and different parts of the group. But you're also, I think, a board member in 4
Yeah.
of the group's companies.
Yeah.
But you've also been, you're also the chief business development officer. So, between how do you see yourself being differently, acting differently between the board roles and the operating roles?
So if it's a mature company, sales sky high, everything is fine, I wouldn't add value as much as I would add value to a company that is probably a startup, a company that I worked with in the board from the beginning till today. Obviously, I would continue. So the people don't know the fiduciary responsibilities that a board member has legally and so on.
Of course.
But there is also you're not in the board just to talk and leave. Sometimes you need to do as much as the CEO has to do. And I leave board meetings with probably tasks on me more than the CEO himself or herself. So I think it's a complementary role.
Is that because of who you are as a person, or is it because of this extra duty towards the family business?
Both.
So you're talking a lot about discipline. You're talking a lot about a sense of duty, but you're also mentioning that your commitment and your dedication is also part of you. I have a feeling from our conversation that even if you were another company that's not the family group, you would still be the hardworking, the disciplined, the taking on more responsibilities person. Is that actually?
Yes, and it happened in my consulting years. I enjoy it, but the difference is basically the psychological part of things. I would still do the extra mile in non-family business as an employee because I'm getting paid to do that.
Yes.
I'm getting paid not to only do my job, but also to excel. But the psychological factor is 10 times when it comes to the family business, because if you achieve 50%, it's not enough. For my self-satisfaction, I want to achieve 120%. In a non-family business, I did my best, I achieved 50%. Next time, hopefully, I will achieve more. That's it.
Okay.
In the family business, you will feel that.
And is this discipline and sense of commitment and drive something that people have noticed about you?
In the business, yes, and in personal life as well. I like to be on time, always. And even if we're gonna go, a family.
Yes, your kids, remind me, your kids are how old?
4 and 1.
How do you keep a 4 and a 1-year-old on time?
You cannot. You cannot. But you try, and they get frustrated.
And at work, how do people notice that you're...
It's not a good example, but I'm available 24/7. Nighttime, morning, early morning, late night.
Weekends?
No. Weekends is probably my best because you can focus. But also I like to try my best to spend time with the family.
Hey, how do you find balance between this drive and this commitment and 24/7 versus a family and time for you?
Well, physically you can find the time, but now everything is on the phone. So even when you're with your family, WhatsApp is working, by the way. Messaging is yes. When you talk to your colleague or your boss or your employee or you're working, but you're physically around the family. I don't want to keep doing this because I'm losing the momentum or the nice moment. Physically, I'm there.
It's an issue we all face.
And I remember in consulting, we used to focus on work-life balance. But I don't think that this is a good terminology, work-life balance.
Why?
Because I think work and life come hand in hand.
There's no balance, or?
There is a balance, automatic. But you don't have to balance both. It's all integrated.
If I asked your wife, do you have work-life balance, would she agree?
No. She would say, no. Actually, I need to do better when it comes to family, at least spending time with the family.
Awareness is half the solution, as they say.
Yes.
So that's good. I want to go a little bit back to the different stages in your career. You've worked with many different bosses as you went through. Yeah. It's been, 12 years now?
Almost.
After consulting?
Yeah, Yeah, 12,
13.
12, 13, 12. 12, 12.
So the people that you reported to or the leaders that you worked with, have they shaped you in any way? Have they taught you anything? Have you taken away lessons from different experiences with them?
Absolutely, but the one most important thing, you have to adapt. You cannot say, this boss is unlike that boss, or that boss is better than the other boss we had. You have to adapt. Everyone is different. You have to adapt that you have a different boss at some point of time. And you have to be flexible and get the best of him or her, learn, and let the, I would call it silly things that people might tend to focus on aside and just focus on the professionalism. I learned from few bosses discipline, of course. I learned from few bosses or one boss that I can never forget, his analytical skills. Another boss whom I look up to, I learned from him basically leading by example. He wouldn't ask you to do it. He would do it with you. So it's a mix of experiences, but at the end you have to adapt, you have to accept.
And how does this dynamic in terms of dealing with your superiors change when some of them might be family members?
I had maybe 5 or 6 managers. Only one of them was a family member, who's the chairman.
Okay.
Yeah, only one.
How was that different?
And it was 3 years probably, or 4 years. To be honest with you, it's not different, because all of the managers I worked with really were into the business and felt the business and were hardworking.
Okay.
So it's the same. Again, the psychological part
Yes.
of dealing with a family member is sometimes.
That 120%
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If we switch a little bit focus, Abdullah, to what's happened, the industry that you're in, so water, power, and so on. Another industry that, we were touring the MTech lab, looking at all the AI tools. So that's the front end. The back end is data centers.
Correct.
That need a lot of water and which maybe a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
And also need a lot of power and energy.
Correct.
How do you see that shaping your business and the sector, and also Saudi's position in this industry?
Well, data centers is definitely coming in big. It already is, but in Saudi Arabia you have low cost of power, you have abundance of land, you have abundance of sunshine, you have abundance of water, you have government support, you have grants, you have subsidies, you have export support, you have you name it. All of the incentives and enablers that you would want exist in the kingdom, let alone the natural aspects. As I told you, the water, the desalination business in Saudi Arabia is so big, the biggest in the world. So the combination of all of these really makes Saudi Arabia a haven for data centers and industrializing any technology, localizing any technology.
So you're the business development, the chief business development officer. So when you look at all this demand that's coming in from the market and the impact of AI on how also companies are operating, where do you see the opportunities for the group, and how do you see your services evolving to meet this demand?
It's very simple. It's an application. A data center will always need products. These products we already have, whether we apply it in power plants or data centers or mining sites or oil and gas sector. All of them will need a pump. All of them will need electrical equipment. So that's already there. The other part is the engineering part of data centers, which we are tapping into, and also integrating different solutions within a data center is something that we look at heavily.
And the group operates within Saudi only, or also?
All over the world.
Okay.
We also, through our factories and joint venture in Saudi, export to more than 26, 30 countries
And is your presence in Saudi with all those elements that you mentioned before in terms of the government support and the natural resources, do you see that as a differentiator or as a competitive advantage for you as you compete around the world?
It's not only for us, for every single factory in Saudi Arabia. So it's a competitive advantage provided by the government. One. Second, the competitiveness of our pricing in Saudi Arabia. As I told you, low cost of power and so on. It all reflects on competition or competitive pricing. And the quality of products. All of these three go hand in hand in successful export business and so on.
There's a lot of, I remember when the Chinese model DeepSeek was released, there was a lot of talk about how it was more energy efficient and it needed less compute to be able to do the same thing or a similar level of performance as the Western models. Do you worry that if you're trying to meet this expanded demand that something might change technologically and your clients might no longer need it or some of them might go out of business? How do you balance this risk of wanting to tap into the growth but at the same time securing your own revenues, if you like?
One beautiful thing about businesses overall is focus. Our focus is water and power, regardless of the application. As long as we're living, we will need water and power. So regardless of data centers or X, Y, and Z, the business will always be there. But it's about efficiency and business development and new ideas and so on. But the water and power business is the core and it will always be there.
Okay. Good. So I guess there's lots of flexibility in shifting your focus and reallocating resources.
Exactly.
All right. Okay, we're going to do a few, we call them rapid fire questions, but most of the time they end up being not rapid fire at all. So take your time answering them if you want to. You can be as brief or as lengthy as you like. Looking back, is there a decision that you took somewhere along your career and your journey that maybe at the time didn't seem that significant, but ended up having a big impact either on your work life or on your personal life?
Yes. Deciding to get an international scholarship and go study abroad. Why? I learned self-reliance.
You were 17, 18?
18.
18, okay.
So I became independent in an early stage.
This is in Canada?
In Canada. By the way, I don't care about the school I went to, the certificate, because when you ask me about my experience there, it wasn't really the certificate that I got and hang on the wall. It's actually me being self-reliant, independent, which many people weren't at young ages. Many. And living abroad across the ocean.
Had you traveled alone before or lived abroad before?
No.
Oh. It was always trips with family?
That's it.
Okay.
Or friends. A few days and that's it.
Was it a culture shock?
It was all kind of shocks. Weather shock, culture shock.
Yes, kind of.
Yeah, culture shock, many things. But as I told you, I learned independent.
And when you took this decision or you were pushed to go?
No, I took it.
You took it. What drove you there to do that? Why didn't you just take the easy route and stay here?
Because I stayed at the beginning here.
Okay.
And I wasn't doing well.
Okay.
Because all of my friends around me and back then, or maybe I'm the one who's distracting.
This is before you learned discipline.
Before I learned discipline. So I chose to for the experience as well. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right. In this journey, is there someone who has shaped you, who has changed the way you think about your career or about your life or about how you see your trajectory?
Yeah, well, not only one. A lot of people, but mainly my father.
In what way?
By the way, he doesn't know that but it's subliminal. It's subliminal. I saw his passion when I was young in his own business and frequent travels back then It was not easy to travel, early, mid-90s, and with all of the political issues back then. I remember going to school at 6:30 a.m. and he was already awake and watching TV, having his breakfast because he's going to go to work. And he's an owner. He can't just stay home.
Yeah.
So it's subliminal.
Maybe that's one of the things that affects how you see your duty, as you call it today, as well.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Our fathers always shape us more than we tend to find out later in our lives. All right. Another question. In terms of, have you ever been given, in consulting, we love to talk about feedback all the time, and it's 360, and we're all getting feedback all the time.
Yeah.
Across this journey that you've had, the 16 years, any surprising feedback that you got that you didn't expect?
Oh, yes. There is one feedback 4 or 5 years ago I will never forget. I think we were in a meeting, whether it's a board meeting or just a business meeting, and the chairman was part of the meeting. And there was someone who wanted support in a business development thing. And I wasn't approached by him. So when he brought it to the table in the meeting, the chairman said, well, you should have called Abdullah. His only problem is he never says no. Until today, that's 4 or 5 years ago. Until today, it resonates.
Did you start saying no more often after that?
I try.
But not succeeding? Or succeeding?
Sometimes succeeding, sometimes not. But I try because I think it's important to say no.
Every productivity advice out there says you need to be able to know when to say no. Because
Yes.
otherwise you talk about discipline, you talk about focus. That's very important.
I agree.
It's quite obvious through our conversation that you're quite aware of the things that you need to change about yourself.
But
Which
I'm
is
not progressing.
But you're trying, which is good. It's not a common thing in
No.
people to be so self-aware. If you were able to go back in time and talk to young Abdullah and give him a piece of advice, what would you tell him?
Enjoy it. Enjoy everything you go through.
You didn't?
Not as much as I should have.
Why?
I think, again, it's the things that I need to change and I'm not changing. So I think that, but doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy the journey. I loved it, I enjoyed it. But I wouldn't stress as much as I used to stress. So I would say enjoy it, relax, and just have fun.
Is there something that you consciously do now to de-stress?
I love to watch documentaries.
Okay, that's your disconnect.
Yeah, I don't like reading. I read articles, I don't read books for some reason or another. But I love to watch documentaries, political, economical.
Your kids are still young, but you're going to be shaping their perspective on the world. You said with your father it was a more subliminal lesson. If you were to, are you consciously thinking what to instill in them as they grow older and what values to give them?
Yes, as you said, it's too early, but I would focus on kindness, humbleness, respect, because all what we have is basically reputation. That's all what we have. So with all of these good deeds and gestures, you will have a good reputation. So I would focus on these humbleness, kindness, being human. Being human, we're all the same.
Definitely very good advice. And if we're going to do this sit down in 10 years' time, what would you like to be able to say about what you've achieved in the
Make
next 10
it 12,
years?
so it's when I'm 50 and I'm already...
Okay, when you're 50 and we're sitting together, what would you like to be able to say about what you've achieved?
I would love to say that in 12 years' time that I did everything I can to serve the family and the family business. And I hope that I served the family business very well, and the progress was up to the expectations in the next 12 years, which is, but then it will be the past 12 years. And yeah, that's it.
The sense of duty and commitment is very clear. Abdulla Abunayyan, it's been a pleasure having you on Unscripted. Thank you very much.
Pleasure all mine. Thank you.